Save the Semantics, episode 266. It is July 29th, 2024. My name is Myra. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Monday evening. Decent weather, nice, relatively cool. It's not too bad. It's a little toasty, but it's not like, it wasn't like the crazy heat from last week, so... On that end, not too bad at all. So this weekend, as I said, the Olympics started. I haven't really watched too much else outside of basketball. I know there's all of these sports happening. It's kind of funny. Like it's not that funny, but it's only 2 weeks. The Olympics, despite being this insane, almost, impossible spectacle, is only 2 weeks long, which I get. It's a little difficult to sustain having just all of these sports going on at the same time in your country. Like your country slash the city of Paris, it kind of goes on a standstill for a little bit of time, right? Like it's probably a bit hard to do much else with that going on, you know what I mean? And with all of the people that are involved, I think it's just a huge and almost impossible endeavor. So no, 2 weeks makes sense, but it is sort of like a short time period for everything that is happening, you know what I mean? Like rugby, multiple events are already done, right? There's a ton of events that have already happened and people have already gotten their medals, and it's only been a couple of days. Some events ended even before the opening ceremony started. Like there's so many things, so you got to try your best to, mitigate that even before the, the official opening of the Olympics, I guess. Anyways, yeah, I haven't really caught on to the other events, mainly because it's a 8+ hour time difference, and it's a little difficult to try to watch those early in the morning. Most of the events are pretty much done by the time I wake up. Plus, I'm especially if it's during the weekday, I'm working, so it's a little difficult. Like I could, if I really wanted to, I could get up early to watch the games, which maybe I'll think about if it is like something that I'm interested in, like basketball or whatever. But most of the other events I'm not super interested in. But it's cool. It's cool. I think it seems like there's definitely a lot of excitement this year. Again, as I touched upon with 2020, the fact that it was held in, or was it 2021? It was 2021, right? They had to move it. The fact that it was sort of in that setting where COVID was still very much prominent. It's hard to do things without a live audience. And now the fact that there is, people, spectators and supporters of the teams and their country and their respective countries, I think just really brings so much more to the actual games themselves, right? So I watched the Serbia and US basketball game on Sunday, and it was good until it wasn't. Like it was good until the US inevitably kind of blew them out in the second half of the game. Serbia came out swinging. It was like a 12-2 or 10-2 lead in the first quarter, and some people, including myself, were kind of like, "Oh shit, here we go, man! It's got a bit of an upset coming." Well, with Jokic, they can't beat Joker, but eventually they kind of toughened their defense, really locked them down, and KD just took over in the first half, especially. He didn't miss a single shot. It was crazy to watch that. He really just sort of, you know, just carried the team in that first half, and that was really exciting to watch. And then they just kind of, you know, shut the door on them going into the third and fourth quarter. So it was still fun to watch. It was still really great to see all of these players on the court at the same time. I think that, you know, barring anything, like they really are the favorites to win for sure. Like it's going to be difficult for sure with other competition, but you know, just having a full team of all-stars and having these Hall of Fame players, you have KD coming off the bench. Like you can't, like, you can't beat that, right? In theory, you can't beat that. So, I still think it's not going to be I still think it's going to be tougher than expected, but obviously the expectation is that they're going to be, you know, medaling and getting first, getting gold. So, but it was fun. I think there's going to be more games, more basketball coming up tomorrow again. I don't know if I'm going to get up early to watch that, but if I am up early, I will watch it. That's probably what it's going to come down to, right? Whether I honestly, that might be a good routine for the next couple of weeks to actually get up early, you know, because I'm bad about that kind of thing. I'm usually not the most on time person. I tend to go a little later than most people, or wake up later than most people. So this could incentivize me to get up a little earlier to watch the games and stuff. So, good stuff. I was gonna get into Final Fantasy X. I'm gonna be talking my head off, pretty much for the most of the time for the rest of this episode, I think. Well, I guess the rest of today. I just wanted to mention this briefly because I thought it was like kind of funny. It just like popped up. I'm not someone who uses LinkedIn really at all, just on occasion, just to pop on and see what's going on, which is usually nothing. It's not really a social media platform, but it kind of is the way people treat it. And I don't know. Sometimes I'm just curious. Maybe it's just, you know, past coworkers and see what they're up to. But there's this one post that just popped up on my feed for some reason. It was this guy. There's a picture of him with a surfboard. And I took a screenshot of it. I'm just going to read the caption. It's this guy. I am a tech/Silicon Valley guy. Parentheses, Apple, Canva, Google, Wikipedia. I am not a billionaire, misogynist, white nationalist, Tesla owner. I am concerned about the welfare of society, not the welfare of tech bros. This is my new surfboard, Kamala. It is 11 feet of carbon fiber awesomeness, stable, fast, and young, just like a good president. I understand the excitement. Look, I don't want to flame this guy. I don't want to flame this guy too hard because, I mean, more or less, it's good intention. You know what I mean? To be like, hey, listen, I support the younger generation. I support Kamala Harris, whatever. Like, that's, you know, supposed to be representative of, yes, you know, progressive ideals, that sort of thing. Which, like, you know, obviously I am in line with. It is just funny that people sometimes just have to go out of their way to be like, guys, I'm not racist. I swear to God. I work in tech. But I swear to God, I'm not one of those assholes. I'm not like Elon Musk, okay? I don't have a Tesla. I don't support any of that stuff. It's like, dude, it's fine if you have a Tesla. Like like other CEOs are probably not great people either. It's just like you don't need to. It's some people just feel there's this need to be like, I promise I am not one of those guys. I'm not one of those guys. It's like you don't have to go out of your way to do all this like performative stuff to get I don't know, sympathy points or whatever. It's fine. Just be a good just be decent. Like, you don't have to do all this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, look, if you are, maybe he's like I don't know, not secretly, but maybe he is someone that is just sort of like a he's trying to get some grassroots support for Kamala. That's fine, maybe, but it's just it's funny how you're putting it. You don't have to name your surfboard after after the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party. You don't have to do all that, man. It's okay. Like, it's fine. Like, who are you trying to prove this to? And it's not like are you trying to tell other like people that maybe already agree with you that you're not an awful person? I mean, that's good, I guess. I mean, it's good to know that you're not an awful piece of garbage person. Like, I guess there's some merit in that, but it's just the messaging of it is so funny. And then you post it on LinkedIn of all places. Like, what are you talking about? Like, why are people on LinkedIn so fucking weird? I don't understand that. It's like it's not every time, but it's once in a while you just get these like sort of weird, kind of strange, out of touch posts / comments about how the world works. Like, another time there's like another post I saw. It was from some CEO. I don't remember who it was, but it was like something along the lines of like, do Fortune 500 CEOs earn too much money? Well, let's break it down. This guy here earns like $200 million, $300 million a year. But if you take into account just like the stress of the job and managing personnel, maybe it's, maybe there's a lot on his shoulders. So maybe you should take that into consideration. It's like, yes, no, these people earn way too much money. Like, is that really that much of an argument? I don't really. It's hard not to be like, I don't know, man. That's a lot of money. Like, I think it's like, I understand the angle of being like, listen, these people have a lot on their plates. Maybe the compensation for their work is worth it. I'm like, yeah, but like $500 million a year, while some of like their employees could potentially be like on near minimum wage. It's like, no, I didn't know they do. I think they do earn too much. I don't think that's too much of that's not that crazy to argue against that. And there's like a whole post written about it. It's not all the time, but it is just once in a while when I do go on. Like, someone, I don't know who, it just pops up on my feed for some reason. Like, it's not like I don't follow any of these people. Like, it just comes up. Like, maybe it's like LinkedIn's like own trending algorithm. I don't know how that works necessarily, but it's funny. It's kind of silly and a little just weirdly, I mean, not weirdly, it is out of touch. In my opinion. But you just got these people being like, guys, listen, have you considered what the rich people think? It's like, no, we already know what they think. Like, it's, you don't have to be a spokesperson for them. You are one of them. Like, why do you need to? It's I don't know. It's kind of funny. Like, this one, the one I just said about the guy with the surfboard, like, it's pretty harmless for the most part. It's just kind of funny. You know what I mean? It's funny that he went out of the way to make his post. I clicked on his profile, and he's like some kind of, I don't know, speaker, like tech guru kind of guy. So I'm like, okay, that kind of that's sort of in line with the rest of the work he does, but is that really drawing people in to buy your courses? Maybe. I don't know. It's like, listen, I'm one of you guys. I swear to God, I don't. It's like I don't think of minorities as less than me. Like dude, you don't have to, you don't have to do the song and dance. But I guess if that's your gig and you're trying to sell, then you'll sell in any way possible. So I don't know. I just thought that was I just thought that was funny. I don't. It's such a weird, like, it is not. I think I've joked before that LinkedIn is the worst social media platform. It's not. It's really not. It's just such a strange world. You know, like you could legitimately say somewhere like Twitter is an awful place, because of just the rhetoric and just the people that are just being awful on there. I think there's a lot of arguments that can be made about Twitter being just the worst place on the internet, but I think that with LinkedIn in general, it's just kind of like a strange kind of place where you get very skewed views of how the world works, and you get people with very kind of like sort of this kind of limited scope, and they try to give you these little tidbits of knowledge and information about how to how to get yourself into a better career or something like that, which is maybe viable in a lot of ways, but it's just kind of this mishmash, just hodgepodge of people trying to give advice for some reason, and then also posts about having a surfboard named after the a president, which is an interesting choice, but it's not as crazy as I guess some other people. It's really not that crazy. It's not crazy. It's just funny to me. There's way more. There's worse people out there. You know. Am I being too judgmental? Like I just don't go on LinkedIn that often, but it just happens to be when I do go on there. There's people that the posts that I see on there are kind of wacky and silly. So that's it. That's all I wanted to say about LinkedIn. What a colossal waste of everybody's time. I finally beat Final Fantasy X last night. So I'm gonna get into pretty much the entire game and hit on all of the major plot points, obviously touching on the ending and my main takeaways with this game. So I'm obviously I'm going to be getting into spoilers and that sort of thing. The title is going to contain something along the lines of Final Fantasy X spoilers. So if you saw that and clicked on it, then you probably know what to expect. But if you I highly recommend playing this game, but if you don't care about the spoilers or whatever, then that's that. But if you do, eventually want to play the game and experience it for yourself, then I recommend just not listening. I think actually for the YouTube post of this, I'm going to try to put like a timestamp so that you can kind of skip ahead to the next point where I finish talking about the game. So I think I'll probably do that for the YouTube upload. But for the regular podcast site, I would just sort of maybe skip ahead as much as you can. So I beat the game. No real changes in terms of the way I feel about the game. I think that it's sort of more solidified my love for the game. I think that I'm considering this to be up there for me. It's after after reaching the end of the game. I was tearing up at the end. Like that ending was brutal. That's a tough pill to swallow. But it was incredibly well done. All of the moments that led up to that point was so well executed. This was a very well, just well directed story and narrative, and I think it's definitely one of the best ones that I've seen in Final Fantasy, and it's up there as one of the better ones that I've seen for, games in general, and JRPGs, RPGs, that sort of thing. I can very much see why this is considered to be one of the most well regarded games from the PS2 era, and then also just in the Final Fantasy universe in general. Let's get into kind of the way in which this story sort of developed. I touched upon it a couple weeks ago was it a couple weeks ago? It was like last week. I forgot when. But I mentioned that at the very beginning of the game, you're sort of introduced to the title screen and a particular scene in the game in which you see the characters. They're kind of by a bonfire. There is like a sense of like melancholy, but you really don't know what's happening yet, because it's just this is the first scene that you get. And when they do introduce the actual scene within the game, it has such a different context, and it really flips the tone of the game. It was already a pretty sad and pretty somber game, but once you get to that point, it just feels completely different, and there's this kind of very you can tell there's just this huge change in this like tone, you know what I mean? It gives more emotion to that scene and to the song that plays behind it, right? I already kind of touched upon that. From the very beginning of the game, with Tidus's character, you already if you pay attention enough, you already get a sense that the world that he exists in, which is Xanarkand, is not fully realized. It's essentially a dream. It's not technically, quote unquote, real, which means that Tidus himself is not real. He's not a real person that exists in this world. He is an amalgamation of an idea created by the collective persona, which is called the Faith. I'll get into that a little bit more, but essentially, he is not a real person. The place that he came from does not exist in real life. The real world is Spira itself, which is the world that he kind of escapes to, right? So it's kind of like if you're used to watching something like some kind of like isekai anime where the main character like escapes from his very mundane world into some kind of fantasy world, it is almost a reversal of that. It is almost like it's kind of like a flip of that, in a sense, where he himself is escaping his own fantasy and is going into the real world after the contact that he makes with Sin. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting how they presented that. And I really like the reveal of that later on. That sort of ties into ties into kind of the scene where everybody's around the campfire and that sort of thing. With the very beginning of the game, I think, the things that sort of pop out that sort of, gets you to sort of question what's really happening and question whether Xanarkand is sort of this realized world or not. The fact that it's called Xanarkand and nothing else, right? Like, what is Xanarkand? Xanarkand is like the city and the world too. Like, Xanarkand is like the only thing that we know of that exists in Tidus's world, right? Like that's like the only thing that we kind of know about it. We aren't given really any history of anything. We're not giving any sense of like it's just like it's like the crazy world of, you know, these huge buildings and the water, these water currents running around it. We're giving a very fantastical vision of this world, and we just simply have an image of it. Well, we don't know anything about the culture. We don't know anything about the like the history of it. And I was wondering, like, are we ever gonna get any backstory on this world, right? And you know, I think one of the sort of, I don't know if you would say like red herrings, but maybe kind of like a false narrative of sorts, a false little hint that we get is the fact that once Tidus does go to Spira, he finds out that Xanarkand was destroyed 1,000. Was it 1,000 or 10, like 10,000 years ago? Was it 1,000 or 10,000 years ago? I forgot. One of those numbers. It was destroyed thousands of years ago. So your inclination as the player is that you think that the world, that Tidus was like, you know, transported into the future, right? That's kind of like the thing that comes into mind. That's sort of like the obvious conclusion that you come from when he's told that Xanarkand is sort of like destroyed and has been destroyed for many, many years. But, you know, it's kind of like we get that little tidbit, but that's sort of like a false, you know, it's kind of leading you in the wrong direction. That's not actually what's happening, right? So even with that, you know, we get that, we get conversations about, especially like with Waka, about how, you know, Xanarkand kind of came to ruin because of their increased advancement with machinery and machinas, as they call it in the game. And because of that, sin came to destroy parts of humanity in order for them to atone for their, you know, sins. But sin is sort of that, he sort of materializes as an actual kind of physical threat, right? So we get that, but it's like, it's still not exactly enough to really tell you what exactly Xanarkand is, you know what I mean? That's not enough to tell you about Tidus's kind of history and how he kind of, you know, what exactly his existence really means and who he was as a person. What we get from his kind of backstory is really only his relation to Jecht, which is his dad, right? Everything else is almost kind of washed out. Like there's no, it's he has, you know, he has a character and he has a personality, but his backstory is very much limited to just his relationship with his father and the fact that he had a difficult relationship with his father, right? Because he wasn't present for a good amount of his life, right? So that's like the only, that's almost the only connection that he has to his world, along with Blitzball, right? And I think it's really interesting that we just don't get a ton in terms of who he was as a person and you know, the interpersonal connections that he has had. It's really just his dad that we kind of know of him. So it's like it's pretty, you know, I feel like narratively it's kind of like you want to learn more about Tidus. You want to learn more about kind of the, you know, how he became as a person and all those things. And we're given little breadcrumbs like throughout the game, and throughout the story, before eventually finding out, you know, who and what he actually is. I think his development as a character is one of the best that I've seen in really any game. I said this before I start, I said this when I first started off playing this game, talking about how I have this feeling that his character is going to have, a major development, sort of similar to another game, Tales of the Abyss, in which Ash, who's the main character, undergoes this kind of almost metamorphosis of himself when he discovers who he is and he develops his relationship with the party, and it is sort of in line with that. I think in this case, Tidus is able to sort of he retains. I think he retains a lot of himself, because by the end of the game, he is still very much himself. Like, he's still this energetic and kind of joyful personality, but he just has so much more maturity than he did at the beginning of the game because of what he learns and what what he eventually accepts, which is sort of his, him giving almost kind of giving up his life, in order for the world to continue to exist, right? Which I'll also get into, because I think the ending is incredibly well done and powerful. But I think that it really, for the first maybe quarter or so of the game, it really, it doesn't give you any reason to really like Tidus at all, because he is kind of just a jackass. He isn't willing to really accept any responsibility for what he does. He doesn't really seem to care about what's happening. He just is kind of along for the ride. And again, we sort of get that because Tidus is sort of telling the narrative of what's happening, right? And it's very interesting that his narration stops right after they get to Xanarkand. So I think once we get to that point of the game, with the famous cutscene, he has already kind of come into himself, where he kind of realizes the situation. He has a very, he has a much clearer understanding of everything that's going on. So it is like, it's Tidus from that point in the game telling the story of himself leading up to that point. Like, he's sort of like recounting the events up until that point in the game, where he is like his fully like realized self. That sort of narrative device too, I think also is kind of this, I want to say, how do I say it? It is, similar to the 1,000 year, destroyed 1,000 years ago, where you think the game is taking place in the future of Tidus's world. When you hear Tidus recounting his story, you think that he's telling from the perspective of after the game ends, but it's like, no, he doesn't make it technically till the end. He gives up his life. So it's only to that point in the game where he's really telling that story. So that's sort of like a not it's not a distractor. I can't think of the right word, but it's a little, it's misleading for, for narrative purposes, because you're expecting that he's going to make it all the way through, but that's not the case at all. Like, it's kind of like, oh, this is Tidus telling the story about this, this adventure that he went on. But no, he's actually just actively telling it, because at that moment in time, he existed. So I really think that's really interesting. I think that the ultimate kind of sacrifice that he does make, I thought was, I mean, you saw it coming from when you are sort of told about him being this dream, this kind of manifestation of a dream and that sort of thing. But you're like kind of like holding on to hope that that's not actually going to happen. It's the same feeling you have when you find out that Yuna is kind of on this, almost like suicide mission in order to save Spira. And when they do find a way to solve that issue, which is essentially, beating this kind of god, you kind of kill a god, and at the end of this game, which is very, very in line with JRPGs, but there's kind of this, there's a god that exists within Sin that they have to defeat. And that's sort of the ultimate enemy. And but like you're sort of hoping that Yuna doesn't die at the end of the game. Like that's sort of like the, you want that to be the, you want that to not happen, obviously. The kind of the reversal of the sacrifice, where it was initially going to be Yuna sacrificing herself, kind of passes on. That burden is picked up by Tidus at the end of the game. And I thought that was just like beautiful. It's like heartbreaking. You go with this kind of sense of dread of what's going to happen, at the end of the game. And once you do reach a point where you're like, oh, she actually doesn't have to die, then you realize, oh no, like then you realize that Tidus has to go instead, because once they do defeat the god, which is called Yevon, once they do beat it, he ceases to exist, because Sin and Sin and the god's existence and the faith, which are sort of the kind of like, I don't know how else to put it, but kind of like collective unconscious of past people and individuals, their thoughts and their dreams kind of manifested into the world of Xanarkand, which Tidus exists in. So Xanarkand is a dream. It is an idea of the past that existed, and so once the god is defeated, there's no real reason for the faith to continue to exist. They can finally rest, because they don't need to essentially use their spiritual power, essence, or whatever, in order to try to continue to fight against Yevon and the gods. And so once that sort of is complete, then there's no reason for Tidus to exist, because he can't exist anymore without because the foundation of his existence is based on something else's creation, right? I think that the whole concept of dreams and how it can become this sounds like so cliche and everything, but like how dreams can become a reality, and how it's sort of like physically shown in the game, I thought was really well done. I think that, as I said, you get, even at the very beginning of the game, you get the sense that Xanarkand is kind of this weird sort of dreamlike world, right? Because it just doesn't seem to be rooted in any sense of reality. But dreams also being a reflection of your memory, I think, is also a very important thing to take into account. With Yuna's speech at the very end of the game, she talks about how dreams and people and lives, they do eventually go away, but your recollection of it, your memory of it will not go away, right? So essentially, it's kind of like the dream is sort of like passed on to someone else, right? In this case, it's the dream and the idea of someone or something is it was with Yuna, and they continue to exist within her, right? Like, again, the dreams, these things that happen, they will fade away, but people won't forget them. The people, the places, the experiences that you had with those people, if they did exist, are still a part of that person. They are still a part of other people who did experience them, right? And I think that's like really interesting, right? I mean, this is it also is, it's also, dreams going away is also in line with, people just passing away in general, right? I really like the idea of the essence of someone, that person existing and no longer existing, despite them no longer being a part of the world, they still are a part of people, and maybe, their cultures and that sort of thing, like the memories that people kind of carry on. You're carrying on their, their life with you in a sense, right? Because of what you experienced with them. And I think that is really important and kind of like an integral piece of this game, and how life, despite you maybe no longer existing in the world, you could still be and you can still be a part of someone else's life after your passing. You know what I mean? So that I found to be just like a very strong message, and I really resonated with that. The sort of want to kind of continue going forward despite all of the tragedy and all of the turmoil that people and the world of Spira have faced, and just sort of striving forward regardless of the things that have happened, I think is also a very core message. I think that's a very, common theme in the majority of JRPGs and games of that nature, where the protagonist and the people that you follow throughout the majority of the journey really are embodying perseverance and just the will to power, the will to go beyond human suffering and human just sorrow and that sort of thing, and getting past that, despite the things that have happened, right? In opposition to Tidus, Yuna, the rest of the party members, you have, kind of one of the main antagonists of the game, which is Seymour, which I think is kind of a funny name for a villain. I just want to say that. You would expect with like his design and stuff, his name would be something kind of a bit more crazy, like I don't know, Gavit, I don't know, some crazy ass name, but his name is Seymour. It's just, I don't know. Anyways, the way he wanted to approach essentially ending the sorrow and the sadness, and easing what he believes is easing the pain of the people, is just killing everybody, and so that they could join in kind of like a heavenly matrimony, in the far plane, which is sort of the afterlife, right? Which I think is very It's kind of similar to some other games that I have played, or that I know of, where it's like, in order for people to be relieved of their suffering, that we must all come together, but we all have to die. I have to destroy this world, right? That's just kind of the mentality of these people, because Seymour, we're given a little bit of a background to his character, not like a ton, but I think it's enough to give an inclination of his upbringing and the type of person he is. But he sort of had like a maybe sort of like a weird childhood, where he's half Guado, which is one of the races in the game, and half human, and so you're sort of you're kind of, it's kind of implied that he experienced some things in his childhood, to the point where he killed his father, right? That's kind of explicitly said a few times throughout the game. And then just like on top of that, based on his connection with Yevon and just the teachings of the religion, he truly believed that releasing people of their suffering is akin to essentially destroying the world, right? So instead of building towards something where that doesn't exist, which can be more difficult, right? It is more difficult to try to kind of rebuild towards like a future that maybe you personally won't benefit from, where you might not reap the benefits of a peaceful world, because you exist in a tumultuous one right now. It is far more difficult to kind of accept that than it is to sort of be in your own in the current world and destroy everything, right? And just be like, you know what, in order to end my own suffering, I need to end everybody else's suffering. So that's kind of Seymour's solution to the problem, and his own kind of anguish, right? Just destroying everybody else and anything like that. So good contrast. I don't think he was the most compelling villain necessarily. I think I wanted to feel his presence a little bit more. Like, he started to become a bit of a joke boss meme as the game continued, because he just kept showing up. It's like, he's not dead. Like, he hasn't died. He just keeps coming back. You know what I mean? And I wish that they treated him with a bit more, like, I don't know, they gave him a bit more of like a serious role. But it's okay. I think it's not too big of a deal. He becomes kind of like a Gilgamesh character. Gilgamesh is a sort of like a joke boss character in Final Fantasy V. So I do wish they maybe gave him a bit more, less of kind of this almost comic relief kind of thing. But I understand this game is already very, heavy and stuff, dealing with very heavy themes. So having a little bit of levity there, I think, is okay. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I touched upon kind of the big things that I really took away from this game. I feel there are more things that I can kind of gush about, but I feel that I might be kind of repeating myself with some of the things. Obviously, I already talked about the music and the presentation and all those things, which I appreciate. I really, I mean, I kind of spoiled the whole game and all of the major plot points. But, even after hearing that, you still want to experience this game somehow, I do really recommend it. I think that going from beginning to end and experiencing all of that is a really just kind of it just feels so satisfying to go through with it, even despite the kind of the sad ending to the game, right? I think that not all games are going to end in kind of this, happy splendor, and it's not going to end all in happily ever after, because that's not what you get. And I think that's very, it's very real. I think it's a good thing to kind of have that sort of narrative once in a while. So yeah, despite me giving away almost everything, if you did listen to this and find it interesting, I do recommend checking it out. Maybe you can watch like a gameplay of it, or watch a playthrough of someone else playing it. That could be fun too. That could be a nice little experience. A few more things. So the game that I got, or the version that I got, is the remastered version, which also comes with Final Fantasy X2. So I've heard mixed things about X2 or 10.2, about how there's like a very huge tonal shift. It is a direct sequel to 10, which has never been done up until that point for any of the Final Fantasy games. That sort of goes against the ethos and the the what is it, the kind of the principles of the creator, Hironobu Sakaguchi. Like that, it goes against his like way of going about games. When a game is complete, you leave it be and you kind of move on to the next project or the next storyline. When a game comes to, when a story comes to its close, you don't continue it, you start anew. And so that Square kind of decided to go kind of against that, because they felt that they could reuse the assets created with 10, and considering that 10 was a very successful game, it's like if we make a sequel, we'll probably get more money from that. That's kind of the cynical corporate side of things. So with that, I think came with a lot of mixed reviews, obviously, with just the approach of the game, the tone of the game, shifting from such a serious kind of story to something that's a lot more lighthearted. I think is kind of can probably be a bit jarring and a bit of a whiplash. So I mentioned that I'm probably gonna get into Unicorn Overlord, after beating 10. I might consider playing 10.2 later down the line if it's something that piques my interest. Apparently the battle system is really fun. And there's, the music is also, I've heard, is pretty good as well. Kind of the common consensus I'm seeing is that don't go into this expecting any kind of masterpiece or any, a really, well-told story, but as a direct sequel, if you're someone who kind of appreciates a bit more fanfare and a bit more, a little bit more kind of like fan service, and not necessarily like a bad way, this could be something that would be exciting. So I might play it. Apparently it's like a shorter game too, so this could be something kind of later down the line where if I feel I have the time and I kind of am just like, maybe I'm just want to dive back into the world of Final Fantasy X, I'll pick up or I'll get into 10.2. But we'll see about that. That's sort of like real back end of my, catalog and library of games. But I'm considering it. Like I really was not thinking about 10.2, but I already have it, so it's like might as well play it. It's just like an extra game, and it could be fun. So it might be a nice little palate cleanser after going through something maybe more serious. But for now, I'll hold off on it, and I'm just gonna sit with experiencing a really well done game in Final Fantasy X. Just very, very happy that I played through it and experienced it for the first time. I'm also really happy. So I guess one more thing before I kind of jump off for today. I sort of had, this game has been out for a very long time, so I did hear discussions about kind of the ending of the game, But I didn't, I think I did a good job in not spoiling myself on the ending. I really thought that, like, when I heard, when you discover that Yuna is going to be kind of essentially sacrificing herself, my mind immediately goes to, oh shit, she's going to die at the end of the game. So the fact that there was kind of this shift from her, no, it was actually Tidus that goes away, was I mean, obviously it's incredibly sad within the context of the game, but I'm glad that I wasn't kind of spoiled on that, playing it for the first time. So yeah, I spoiled the whole thing, but go into it. There are games where I think it's just worthwhile to go into it blind as possible, because the story experience is so much more, I don't know, just so much more satisfying. But anyways, I gave it all away, so if you've listened to this point, you know what to expect. That's going to be it for today. I'll probably catch up more later this weekend, talking maybe more hoops, more Olympic stuff. I'm considering maybe, I'm thinking about whether I'm going to get into Unicorn Overlord or not. I think I might just, like, I don't know, I might dive into it. Maybe I'll take a little bit of time off before I get into a whole, another giant JRPG, but I'm sort of in this kind of mood of playing, playing something like that. So we'll see. Maybe I'll provide some first thoughts, that sort of thing. You know the deal. Anyways, that's probably going to do it for now. Catch up with you guys on the weekend, probably. Alrighty, it is Saturday, August 3rd, recording this on a lovely, nice and cool evening after sort of a bit of a hot day today. But yeah, it's nice out. It's very nice out. We have kind of a music festival. There's a lot of music stuff going on, so I tested it out to see if the mic would pick up any of it. Which it might, but there's a lot of shit going on today. So if any of that noise obstructs and picks up on the mic, I apologize for that. There's a way. Look, if I really wanted to go with the extra mile and edit it and all of those things, I could run this through OBS or some other audio program. OBS is more for music, but you know what I mean. Some other audio editing program, but do I sound like I have the time for that? I don't know, maybe I could find another mic if I could, but I've grown comfortable with this over the years, so it is what it is. One day. It is funny how I actually went through the effort of trying to find like a mic to use and that sort of thing. I found a lavalier mic, and I was thinking that I could maybe use that, but honestly, the audio quality was actually worse than the current microphone, which is just my phone, basically. So I sort of stopped using it. I did like a bit of a test run, but it just didn't. And it was a bit, it got, with lavalier mics, you generally keep it on yourself, like you clip it onto, a shirt or something like that. But I just found it to be a bit annoying. So we're just gonna keep rocking with what we have. Anyways, it's this week, there's been more Olympics going on. It is kind of funny how we're a little more than halfway there, I think, or maybe we're sort of reaching the halfway point. It goes by very quickly, which is kind of funny, you know what I mean? I remember with like the Tokyo Olympics, obviously that was during a period of where there was still COVID going on in 2021, but that felt like it went by in a blink of an eye. It was so, it was such like a, I don't know. I honestly wasn't really paying too much attention to it, during that time. So I don't even remember what, I think I caught a little bit of basketball, but honestly, outside of that, I didn't really watch too much of it. So, I mean, this time around, I've primarily been just watching basketball and maybe some soccer and a few other things here and there. But yeah, I've enjoyed what I have seen so far. I guess a quick recap. For basketball, it's moving on to the quarterfinals, which is coming up starting this Tuesday or next Tuesday. And it was interesting with the group play. There was a three-way tie in, I think, Group A, where it was Greece, Canada, who else was in that group? Spain, and then it was someone else. There's one other team in there. Brazil? I don't remember. But there was a three-way tie between Greece, Spain, and then whatever the other team was. I completely forgot who it was. And Greece had the point differential out of basically all of the remaining teams that were left in the competition, and so they were able to pass, which was is very interesting. It's interesting how, because like if you compare it to something like the World Cup and how their group play works, you have the four teams, and the point differential is solely based from what I understand. I think because there were some ties in the last World Cup. From what I remember, I think the point differential and the certain qualifiers in order for a team to advance is based within the group itself and not outside of the group. And so there is like that bit of a difference with the Olympics here. I mean, soccer, maybe it's a little different with basketball for, the FIBA World Cup, but I just find that to be kind of an interesting way of going about it. So instead of relying on within group play itself, you have to sort of expand it out into the rest of the competition, which I don't know. It's interesting how they set it up like that. But yeah, so in that group, Greece and Canada have gone through, Serbia and the US, France and Germany, and then Brazil, and who else? There's one other team. I'm really trying to think. Brazil and Australia. So those are the 8 remaining teams. I think it's a pretty healthy group of competition. I think outside of Germany and Canada, it's difficult to really see any other team holding their own against the U.S., right? I think it's going to be pretty difficult. Brazil is going to be playing the U.S. on Tuesday. I mean, part of me is going to be rooting for Brazil, but it's going to be difficult for them to really do too much. You know what I mean? Because I really don't. Outside of what's his name? He's on the Warriors. Like I completely forgot his name. But outside of our player, I can't really think of anybody else who's on the Brazilian team. Is Raul Neto? I think he might be Brazilian. I forgot. But I can't. There's not really any household names. Like back in the day, we had Barbosa, Varjão. I forgot his name. Thiago, I think. I forgot. He was on the Spurs for a while. This is way back. I think he was also on that team. So there was like a handful of like pretty good players on the Brazilian roster back then, but now it's a little different. I don't think it's the same level of the same star level, right? So it'll be interesting. Hopefully they give the U.S. a run for its money, but I don't see too much happening there. I think France, they do not look good. They got their ass beat by Germany. I think there was a lot of hope riding on Wembanyama, and he's been good, but he's not been good enough to really give them I don't know, give them sort of a gleam of hope to compete with like kind of the powerhouses with Germany and the US, obviously, and Canada. I mean, who knows? He's still an incredible player. Maybe based on, I don't remember who they're going to be playing in the quarterfinals, but based on whoever they're playing, I think maybe they can kind of, maybe he can, be a bit of a problem for teams with maybe smaller, with a smaller front court, right? So I think that it could be, I don't know, it'll be interesting. I mean, he's still incredible to watch to play. Like, he's still just kind of a freak athlete. So, it's cool that he made it through. Him and France made it through. I also think it's cool to see Giannis and the Greek team make it through as well. I think I was a little, I would have been a little disappointed to see, to maybe miss out on one more game from Giannis in at the Olympic stage. I don't know how well they're gonna do, because as I said before, their team is not very good outside of Giannis. Like they're pretty lacking in that sense. So, I mean, they did give Canada some hell. That was probably the most exciting game that I watched out of all of the basketball games that I was able to catch. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to see them going up against like Germany, being able to withstand that. So I don't know. We'll see though. We'll see. Yeah. So this is a quick catch up on some basketball stuff. Good stuff, man. It's cool that at this time of the year we still have that going on. And it is. I think my feelings for the Olympic / international basketball, I think it's really refreshing. The fact that it's like a shorter game, it's only 40 minutes, 10 minutes a quarter. And this is like a huge thing too. And I think this is something that a lot of other people have already sort of mentioned. And I hate to kind of bring it back to this conversation because I've already kind of talked to death about it, but just the fact that there's really no advertisements during the game is so refreshing, and it's honestly kind of disappointing having to go back to that once the regular NBA season does start. You know what I mean? The fact that we're just not bombarded with lines halfway through the game and these point differentials and betting lines while someone is taking a free throw, like that shit is awful. It's exhausting. I've already talked my head off about this issue, but it genuinely ruins the experience in a lot of ways. It's like, oh, we look at, this team had they were favorable by 10 points and now they're on the under. It's like, maybe you should bet at this point in the game so you get a favorable like, fuck that shit, man. Like, fuck that. And like, fuck you too. Like, fuck the NBA for allowing that to happen. And then fuck these gambling sites for essentially ruining the viewing experience. Like, it was already not super great with how much advertisement is already crammed into a broadcast, but just it's insufferable. It's awful. And then going to this where the game is quicker, it's so much faster paced. The game also starts on time too. I don't understand what is ESPN's problem of not starting a game at like on time. It's like, oh, actually it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes plus because we have another game broadcasting. It's nonsense. It's so stupid. I hate that. It's such awful programming. I dislike that so very much. And there's just no, like, sure, you can argue. I know I've seen some complaints about, oh, Dwayne Wade's a little corny and he's kind of annoying, but it's like, yeah, we have that with like Doris Burke. We have these other broadcasters who are almost equally as annoying on the ESPN side of things. Sure, he's kind of he's very new to kind of the broadcasting, and he is a little annoying for sure, but you can turn down the volume. Like, you don't have to listen to him all the time. He is not the problem. The problem is what comes with the product the NBA has to offer, which is not good. It is bad that they're trying to incentivize all of these other third parties to involve themselves in the product of basketball, which essentially kind of takes away from my and other people's enjoyment of the game. It's like invasive. It sucks ass. I hate it. Like it's really frustrating. And I'm it's gonna be like honestly kind of a whiplash going from this, the way the Olympics have been broadcast versus how regular NBA games are broadcast. Like, it is going to be such a whiplash. The fact that you have to sit through all of these commercials and everything, and then with the Olympics, like, sure, if you don't have like the ad-free version of whatever service you're using, you're gonna get kind of the normal commercials, but it still feels so much breezier. Like, there's just, I don't know, man. Like, it's the I don't know. I feel like it makes for such a better product, and I hate calling it a product, but that's kind of what it is. I think the difference, really, and now that I think about it, with Olympic basketball, like, sure, you are still essentially, selling something, but it's less so, because it's not like, you don't have all of these, Olympics, they do have advertisers for sure, but it's just different. It's just very different. I also think the way the game is officiated is different too, with the level of physicality, level of physicality they allow. Certain rules which are kind of interesting, like the fact that you can like tip the ball out of the hoop. Like, there's not really, there is goaltending, but there's other rules that are kind of in place that kind of replace that and make things maybe a bit more, I don't know, there's more fluidity in the game. There's less stoppage time. Like, there are still periods. I think this is a criticism that I have for both basketball, showcases, but there is still kind of a period where they spend a little too much time reviewing, whether whether like someone's foot is on the line, or whoever has possession, or whether whether something should be considered a flagrant foul, or those kinds of things. Like, there's still, I noticed that there's still like a little too much downtime, which can interrupt the flow of the game. But it's still better than the NBA in some cases, right? I don't, despite all of these issues, I don't know if I would be like fully on board with completely switching to an Olympic basketball format. But there's I don't know, man. There's going to be a gap, obviously, in between once the Olympics do end and then going into the fall with the NBA season starting up sometime in October. There's still time. There's still, a few months in between, but, yeah, I don't know. It's going to be, I think we're going to see more, and maybe this has already been a conversation, but I don't know. There's going to be talks about how maybe some other rules should be changed. You know what I mean? Maybe it doesn't have to be super drastic, like the, tipping the ball out of the basket, that sort of thing, because that's pretty, I feel like it's, some players can definitely abuse that. But I don't know, man. Like, 48 minutes is quite a lot of time. And just like the pace of the game and everything like that, it's going to be different, man. Like, you have to really, the shot clock in the Olympic rules is 20 seconds, sort of equating to, 20 minutes to 20 seconds, to 40 minutes in the game, 24 seconds to 48 minutes in the game, right? But it just feels so much quicker. Like, 4 seconds off the clock, like, you gotta move the ball, you gotta be quick. You can't just, you just can't ball hog it. It just doesn't work as well. It's, it much more, I think that it encourages team play much more so than individual play and individual performances. Because, like, you notice that, in the past, like, you had players like Carmelo and stuff go on these crazy scoring sprees where they score like 50 points in a game, but the competition has changed so significantly where you just can't rely on, I don't know, a single player to fully carry, a team to success. Like, I know that I was sort of joking about LeBron having to carry the US team to win against like South Sudan and stuff in the exhibition games, but I think just based on, the group stage so far, we see there's not like these like insane individual performances. Like the most points that players have scored is like 30, right? Like it's nothing crazy because just there's so many other complementary pieces that are there to help support a team. It is better in the long run. I mean, it's better just overall to have more players involved in order to win games. Like it's just different, right? You don't necessarily win. Like Germany didn't beat the US because of like some like insane individual performance. It was very collective, right? Like there was definitely like standouts. Like Franz Wagner played very well last year, and then so did Dennis Schroeder. Like there were certain players that did contribute more than others on the team, but it wasn't like superstar level. It was there was a collective. There's a sense of cohesion, and that's kind of what you need to win at the Olympic level. I mean, in the U.S. case, obviously you have Hall of Fame players. That definitely helps for sure. Having KD come off the bench, which I've already talked about, is like crazy, right? But the fact that you can do that is a huge blessing and an addition, right? But it's I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts. Those are kind of my main ones that are coming up in terms of just how the game is broadcast, the different rules, and the level of competition is just different, and it's fun to watch. And it's also been fun to watch these other countries put a kind of a stake in their name and have a bit of a claim in the competition. So I'm excited to see how the rest of the tournament turns out. I'm hoping that some of the other countries are going to make some noise and we get some competitive games. So that's kind of that's something to kind of look forward to for the rest of the week. So since I've finished Final Fantasy X, I talked about that a ton earlier this week, and I think that it was a very just I almost said kind of what I wanted to say about the game. There are still many thoughts that I have about it, but overall I was very satisfied with the way it concluded and that sort of thing. So this week I actually started up Unicorn Overlord, and I love it. I think it's so much fun. As I kind of said before, the story in the game is probably the least interesting part about it, as I sort of expected based on kind of the the conversations that were happening online. It was expected, right? But despite that, I've had so much fun with this game. I think the gameplay, the strategic elements to it's giving me, it's really giving me kind of that same feeling I had when I first played Fire Emblem Awakening way back when I first really got introduced to strategy RPGs and that sort of thing. I think there's just so much like fluidity with the combat. There's like an insane amount of depth that you could really go into in terms of customizing your characters, customizing different groups and units and that sort of thing. There's so much to it. And I've like barely scratched the surface, you know what I mean? there's like so many ways to kind of like balance out the roster and that sort of thing. And I've already just kind of delved into it. I've already put in like a decent amount of hours into it throughout this past week, and I've just had a blast playing this thing. I you know I'll say, like, the story is pretty bare bones and pretty basic, but I will say I actually think the writing in this game is pretty solid. And what I kind of mean by that is the tone and the sort of the style of the writing is very consistent throughout. I actually think the dialogue in between characters is pretty well done. Like, there's like a clear sort of direction that they were going for with this sort of almost, it's not quite medieval English or old English and that sort of thing. It's different, but the words that they use, the way that they sort of talk between characters, I think is sort of in line with what you would expect. Maybe kind of a modern retelling of a medieval fantasy, right? Something maybe along the lines of Game of Thrones, that kind of thing. And I find that to be pretty compelling. I think that adds a bit of, I don't know, it adds kind of this context. It adds a bit of flavor text, if you want to call it that, to the game. And I think it makes it more interesting. Most of the time, what the characters talk about is really not super is not super interesting, but just the way they sort of, I don't know, pontificate, or they talk about the issues that they're dealing with. It's, they'll say something along the lines of, like, there's like a side mission plot where it's just like, there's like a plague happening in a certain area of this like continent. And so the way they talk about it is just like, oh, my villagers, they have succumbed to the plague 4 moons ago, like something like that. Like, it makes it more interesting than saying, like, my friends, they died from the plague. Like, it's like a little difference between how the characters sort of express themselves, and it makes it more interesting. It makes it more endearing than if it had just been written kind of like typical modern English, you know what I mean? Or just kind of basic English. So on that front, I feel like the English translators, they did a really good job with the dialogue. I think it really makes it just makes it more interesting, despite maybe the source material not being the most like compelling, or not being the most, like, I don't know, it's not like, it's really not a crazy like story. Like, you're gonna go and try to be evil. That's really that's really kind of the gist of it. But the individual character interactions, I think, add more than what you would sort of typically expect from maybe something of this sort of JRPG or RPG, where there's not just like I don't know, it's just not like a wall of text between characters where there's nothing of interest being said, right? So I wanted to kind of add that, because I think that that's, again, typically I am drawn to the story or the plot of large-scale JRPGs, and despite this game not necessarily having something super complex, I think having just different things, these different elements kind of pop out, really make the experience so much more better. On top of, obviously, the really expansive and amazing gameplay. There's like kind of this like loop where you go from mission to mission. You go from, like combat set or like battle set to battle set, and you grow these characters. Like, there's a super large roster of characters in this game, and you can kind of pick and choose like who you want to have in your, the individual units, and then really try to kind of build it out. There's just so much to really, kind of go into that. And outside of the combat, even then, it's more casual gameplay where you go around and you sort of harvest these, materials and stuff, which then you can kind of sell to villages to kind of improve them. It's really simple, but that part too is kind of addicting in a sense. It's a nice sort of break from the main draw of the game, which is the combat. And it adds sort of like an element of like, oh, you're sort of contributing to the improvement of the world and the villages and that sort of thing. And it's I don't know, it's just like it doesn't really require too much thought. And I think it's like the perfect sort of gameplay break really in between these, maybe larger scale battles where it does require some thought and strategy and tactics to maneuver, and you got to think about which units you got to use that have a bit more, that are more favorable to the other opposing units and that sort of thing. Units that can traverse the the plane or the terrain easier. Like there's so much to kind of like think about on the battle side of things. So when you do kind of go out from that, you get kind of like a little, I don't know, it's just sort of like a nice little traversal exploration kind of thing, and it's fun. It's really cool. I think the design and the art style is really pretty. There's definitely, I'm seeing kind of the Vanillaware style and influence, coming from 13 Sentinels going to this. I think the level of detail in this game is definitely, there's definitely more going on, especially kind of on like the overworld. There's some really beautiful kind of set pieces that you can kind of see. I remember there's a section on the map where you kind of see like a mountain range, and then there's like this like waterfall that's like flowing through, and you can, if you sort of go behind that, you can kind of see that in the foreground, and then if you go in front, you get like a more like better view of that, and it's just so well done. It's really pretty, and I think that that was kind of the one things that sort of drew me into this game, outside of the Vanillaware development. I think that just that specific kind of art style is really unique, and I think it's really cool to see that. I really like that, and I really appreciate kind of the way it's integrated into the world, and with the characters and the backgrounds and that sort of thing. And it's cool. It's good stuff. There's a lot to praise with this game. The music is solid too. The music is pretty good. It's not like the most exceptional, but I think that there are some individual tracks that do kind of stand out and are complemented pretty well. But again, as just like an overall package, it's and just as a game, it's great. I'm having a blast with it. I feel like I don't have to worry about, I don't know, like I feel like I can just dump a ton of hours into this and not regret it. Like that's kind of like, it's one of those games, man, and that's really nice. It's like it doesn't feel like I'm, I don't know, wasting my time necessarily, because I am having so much fun with it. But yeah, Unicorn Overlord. It's got a weird ass name for sure, but that's one of the it's one of the elements of it. But it's been a really great time so far, and it's slowly kind of climbing up my list of games that I've very much enjoyed this year alone. So I'm excited to kind of delve into it. I'm probably going to play it I'm probably going to play some more tonight. Anyways, yeah, just that's kind of like, the main things I wanted to kind of catch up on, delving into Unicorn Overlord, and then some more Olympic basketball stuff. I'll probably talk more, next week, maybe some wrap ups of, because I'm trying to remember if, I feel like there would be like finals next week, wouldn't it? Because maybe I'm mistaken. I'm not entirely sure. I'll need to look at the schedule. Regardless, I'm gonna talk some more basketball once those start back up on Tuesday of next week, and then maybe I'll comment some more on Unicorn Overlord. On the side of like story, there's probably not too much that I can really address, but maybe I'll gush more about how I'm enjoying the battle system and all of those things. But yeah, that's probably gonna do it for this week's episode. I did talk a lot about games and that sort of thing. So stay tuned for more shit. Stay tuned for more just ramblings of the things that I've been consuming. Thank you for listening. As always, this has been Say the Semantics, signing off.